For 4 years, Democrats went on and on and on. The corrupt corporate media went on and on and on about kids in cages. You couldn't turn on the evening news without hearing kids in cages. What they didn't tell you is Barack Obama built those cages, and today under Joe Biden, the cages are bigger and they're more full than they were before. Mr. President, every Democrat who stood up and lamented kids in cages in the House of Representatives, Representative Ocasio-Cortez has a famous photo of her grasping her head by the kids in cages. Well, I'm going to give a simple challenge for Representative Ocasio-Cortez and for every Democrat in this body. Go see the Biden cages with your own eyes. I've seen them, the Donna tent facility with over 4,000 people, with little boys and little girls on top of each other. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was in the Rio Grande Valley, the rate of COVID positivity in the Biden cages was over 22%. And all the Democrats who talked about this, if they don't go, if they don't denounce the Biden cages, then they're telling you that they're hypocrites, that they didn't believe it when they said it, that they didn't care about it when they said it, that it was all politics. It wasn't about their kids. Why does Joe Biden refuse to go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if he goes, the TV cameras will come with him. Why does Kamala Harris, who's supposed to be the border czar, she's supposed to be in charge of this, why won't she go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if she went, the TV cameras would come and would show the Biden cages. And the Democrats are counting on the corrupt corporate media to suddenly say, nothing to see here. 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Del Rio, nothing to see here. Anyone want to know what Joe Biden's favorite ice cream flavor is? That's the news. Never mind 1.2 million illegal immigrants. Never mind when I took 19 senators down to the border, we went out on the river and saw a man floating dead in the river who died trying to cross illegally. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers, the moms who told me, I won't let my teenage kids go out on our ranch without being armed with a loaded firearm, because there's so many human traffickers and narcotics traffickers that it's dangerous for them to go out on their own ranch. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers who told me at roundtables how tired they are of going out and finding dead bodies. You want to understand what's happening? Say there's no crisis? Come to Brooks County. I invite every Democrat here to Brooks County. Brooks County in South Texas, it's just north of the border. Brooks County, over and over and over again, they're dead bodies of illegal immigrants. The traffickers who are bringing them in, they're not nice guys. They're not humanitarians. They don't give a damn. That means if one of the illegal immigrants is a pregnant woman, is a young child, is elderly, is sick, they just abandon them. They leave them in the rough terrain, in the summer heat, and over again. The farmers and ranchers encounter dead bodies on their property where the traffickers have abandoned them. Mr. President, I ask you, is that humane? Is that compassionate, the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris policy that encourages, that puts people in harm's way and results in people dying? When we were down on the border, we saw a young girl who had been gang raped by the human traffickers who had brought her to America. The rate of sexual assault is staggering, particularly among the girls and young women. So much so that a significant percentage of young women, before they take the harrowing trip with the traffickers, will implant a birth control because they know the odds of their being sexually assaulted are so great. And I'll tell you, as I was doing the roundtables, one of the things I saw also was the colored wristbands. So the traffickers are global cartels. They're criminals. They're vicious criminals. They charge anyone, a young man, a young woman, a little boy, a little girl, thousands of dollars, anywhere from $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to cross into the United States. By the way, do you know there's 100% operational control on the border? 100% on the southern side. Nobody crosses the border without the cartel's permission. If you do, they will kill you. Every person who crosses the border does so after paying the cartels, because you will be killed otherwise. But often when they come, they'll cross and they'll end up at a stash house. I've been to those stash houses. I've been out on the midnight patrols with the Border Patrol. You go into those stash houses, and they're colored wristbands that they put on the illegal immigrants. And the colors correspond to how many thousands of dollars they paid and how many thousands of dollars more they owe. Often when they get here, the cartels will say, "Thank you for your X thousand dollars, we want Y thousand more." Tragically, it is at those stash houses in the United States where many of the sexual assaults occur. And so these immigrants, many of whom are young children, teenage children, when they get here, the Biden administration delivers them to their final destination. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their administration are the last mile of the human trafficking network. But for the 14, 15-year-old boy who arrives in Atlanta, who arrives in New York, who arrives in Detroit, who arrives in Nashville, many of those 14 and 15-year-old boys owe thousands of dollars to the cartels, which means they arrive in your city. You might think Georgia is not a border state, but when teenagers are arriving in Atlanta, owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, they work for the cartels. And the cartels know who their family is and where their family is, and they risk their mother or father being murdered if they don't work for the cartels to pay off the cartels. The young women have it even worse. There are teenage girls who make the decision, I want to come to America, I want to come to the promised land. We've been a beacon of hope to millions throughout our history. They don't realize they are stepping into hell on earth. When the traffickers take them and then take them to a cartel facility in whatever city they end up in, where many of those teenage girls, still owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, have to work to pay off that debt by forced prostitution. Young girls forced into a life of sex slavery because the alternative is murder at the hand of the cartels. This is happening. The fact that Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about it, the fact that Kamala Harris claims it's not happening, the fact that the corrupt corporate media ignores it, it doesn't stop the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are suffering.
Well, Judge Netburn, I want to continue on this line of questioning. In your court, what matters more, the rights of individuals or your political ideology?
I apply the law to the facts.
I asked a question, which matters more?
Well, my political ideology doesn't matter at all.
Okay, so I don't believe you. And I think this case demonstrates that you are willing to subjugate the rights of individuals to satisfy your political ideology. This case involves a male defendant who raped a 9-year-old boy. Was he guilty of that?
Yes, the petitioner pled guilty to that.
Okay, so he raped a 9-year-old boy. He also raped a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
He pled guilty. The petitioner pled guilty to that crime as well.
So was he guilty?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
And also criminal deviant conduct, which the record doesn't disclose what that was exactly. Then, after serving in prison, Mr. McClain was released for parole, but then violated the terms of parole by having internet and was sent back to prison. 1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
I'm unclear on exactly the time frame that you're at, but the petitioner was convicted of distributing child pornography.
Child pornography that was images of adults violently raping children.
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay,
for which there are real victims.
And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago, you said that when this man decided that he was a she, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
I think what I said, or at least what
that is a verbatim quote, entirely a female.
Sorry, what I meant to say was hormonally a female.
Okay, but that's not entirely. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2" serial rapist, serial child rapist with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Is that a question you're
yes,
asking me?
the other.
Of course.
Do they have the right not to have a 6'2" man who is a repeat serial rapist put in as their cellmate?
Senator Cruz, I considered the facts presented to me, and I reached a decision
I asked you a
based on what
question.
the law
I asked
is.
you a question. Do they have a right not to have a 6'2" man who is a serial rapist put in as their cellmate? Do those women have a right to that?
Every person who's incarcerated has the right to be safe in their space.
But you didn't think so. You didn't think so. And in fact, I'm going to give some quotes from your order because Senator Kennedy is right. This is not a judge's order. This is a political activist. By the way, the beginning of your order says, at birth, people are typically assigned a gender. I got to say that would astonish a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans think you go to the hospital, a baby is born, and congratulations, you have a little boy, a little girl. The assigned a gender, I know you went to Brown, but it sounds like it's in a college faculty lounge with no bearing on reality. The Bureau of Prison argued what I'm saying right now, that if you put this person in a female prison, there will be a risk of sexual assault to the women. And you know what you did? You said you didn't care about the women. I'm going to quote what you wrote. You wrote, quote, the Bureau of Prisons claim penological interest in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. This interest is legitimate, that's kind of you to say, but there are no signs that petitioner is at risk of reoffending. The record is devoid of evidence of incidents of violence or assault during petitioner's incarceration when she was the perpetrator, only the victim. A theoretical risk of sexual assault by the prisoner without more cannot support the BOP's position. No evidence, theoretical. Have you dealt, in what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at a risk of reoffending?
Senator, as I do in every case.
I know you've been told to repeat the line, I follow the law. I asked a question. In what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at risk of reoffending?
Sir, I looked at the facts that were before me in this case. All of the evidence, including the statements of every warden who had supervised this petitioner.
You also wrote, the BOP also posits that permitting petitioner to live among women will be traumatizing and possibly dangerous to them. This concern is overblown. I have to say, if I were the father of one of those women, and you decided that my daughter's cellmate was going to be a 6'2" man who over and over and over again committed violent sexual assault, I would say the entire justice system is absurd, and it is clear on your record your political ideology matters a heck of a lot more than the rights of those women that you endangered. I think you're a radical, and I think you have no business being a judge.
Judge Netburn, there was an opportunity during your exchange with Senator Cruz that you were attempting to offer a response relative to the conditions under which this petitioner was unsafe in the facilities in which she was being held. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to finish that response.
So the facts that were presented to me and what I relied on to make my decision were that the petitioner had engaged in no violence, no physical violence, no acts of sexual violence whatsoever while in custody. all 3 wardens who supervised the petitioner requested that she be transferred to a women's facility because of her serious medical needs. In addition, the Bureau of Prisons' longtime medical provider testified at a 2-day hearing in my courtroom and recommended that the petitioner be transferred because of her serious medical needs. And the last thing I'll say is that the Transgender Executive Council, which is the body that makes decisions on behalf of transgender transfer requests within the Bureau of Prisons, never said that the petitioner could not be transferred, and never, ever said that she couldn't be transferred because of any risk of violence. What the Transgender Executive Council repeatedly said in denying the request was simply that she needed to maintain her hormone levels. That was the repeated justification for the denial of transfer. But the petitioner had reached full female hormone levels before even being incarcerated. At the time, the district judge in Indiana who sentenced the petitioner requested that she be placed in a women's facility. Her hormones were entirely female at that point, and so the decision by the Transgender Executive Council to deny the transfer request based on this idea that it was only because her hormones needed to be consistent and stabilized, I found was a pretext, but they never once said she cannot be transferred because of violence. It was always based on this idea that her hormones had to be.
Thank you, Judge Netburn. Senator
Judge
Padilla.
Netburn, that's
Senator
directly
Padilla.
contrary to what your
Senator,
report
you all
said.
have
That is
had
directly
no.
contrary.
No.
We're going to
No,
You're
there
going to
is
follow
no
up, and that's
follow-up.
how it
No,
works.
there is not.
That is
There
exactly
is-
how it works.
Look,
If
we're
you
gonna be
follow
allowed
up,
to
you didn't get
ask
extra time,
questions?
and she just directly contradicted her own report. I'm just going to read her own words
Now, this isn't
because
fair,
it's
Madam
exactly
Chair.
the opposite of what she said. Your own
Chair.
report.
Senators,
says, quote,
I gave both of you more time
You-
to finish your
you
line
allowed
of
the witness to
questioning.
testify
I
and
allowed the witness
you
to
jumped in
finish
and took
her.
another round.
I allowed
You
the
took
witness
another
to
round.
finish
You
her
opened the door.
response.
You
I
opened the
allowed
door
the
to this.
witness to finish
You're
her
abusing
response.
your status
That is,
chair.
Okay, I understand
That
that you're
is not-
scared of the
You are
facts.
abusing
I
your
have-
status
Chair.
as chair.
Senator
Madam Chair,
Padilla?
You
Madam
can't
Chair,
just open
Thank you,
up
Madam Chair.
testimony and then
she
not
has an
give us the
obligation to
chance
explain
cross-examine.
why she directly contradicted what she wrote in her report. She says in her report, the Bureau of Prisons' claimed penological interest is in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. She just told you the Bureau of Prisons didn't say there was a concern about sexual violence and trauma. Those are directly contradictory, and why are you contradicting what you wrote in your report?
And what are you
Madam
trying to
Chair. I
hide,
believe
Madam
I have
Chair?
the floor.
No, wait, point of
I
order.
believe
Senator
I
Padilla.
have the floor.
Senator
What are you trying to
Padilla.
hide,
Are you going to let her
Madam
answer that question?
Senator
or you
Padilla.
don't want her to answer that question?
Senator
You're
Padilla.
afraid?
This
Very
is
much,
a
Madam
cover-up,
Chair.
Madam
Senator
Chair.
Are you
Padilla.
afraid of the answer to
This
that
is
question?
no
Cover-up.
Are you
Senator
afraid
Padilla.
of the answer to that question?
Senator
Colleagues,
Padilla.
So yes,
My
you are
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
Senator Padilla.
Please hold
Clearly,
my
you're
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.